2015 report. Indeed, between April 2016 and June of 2017, we saw 15 new certificates of airworthiness issued, but in the same period we've seen 29 certificates of airworthiness cancelled and a further 27 in a state of suspension. So we saw 57 cancelled or suspended certificates of airworthiness, about 4 a month. Okay, it's an industry in crisis. And look, I'm not going to be kind here. I'm going to tell the way it is, the way that the RAC committee, who have received briefings over and over again on the state of general aviation. CASA is basically, or has been, regulating general aviation out of existence. Let me just talk about a new regulation that CASA has recently introduced, and I did move a disallowance, and it's back on the notice paper tomorrow, in relation to community service flights. This is to give you a perspective of what's happening inside CASA. Now, if you don't know what a community service flight is, let me tell you. There are pilots who are willing to give their time and their experience. They are licensed, they are safe to fly, they have a licence that I can jump into an aircraft with and fly off to Kangaroo Island on the weekend if I wanted to, or whatever. They are declared safe to fly, and what they do sometimes is they, through an organisation, normally an organisation that is responsible for making sure everyone meets all of the general requirements, the safety requirements, what they do is they will give their time to fly sick people from remote locations to major centres. So let me give you an example. If you're living in Ceduna and you need chemotherapy, now you can take the 7-hour drive from Ceduna to Adelaide, do the chemotherapy, and then drive back. That's pretty demanding. In fact, it just makes that treatment almost impossible. Under one of these community service flights, Angel Flight in particular, they'll send a pilot out that will pick you up, fly you to Adelaide, and then return you after your chemotherapy. And what happens in that instance is the people are not charged. There's no sort of commercial gain made by these pilots. All they get is a bit of assistance in terms of fuel. So a bit of a kick-along gives them an opportunity to enjoy the pleasure that they are safely licensed to fly, and they are allowed to assist people. Now, there have been 2 unfortunate and fatal crashes relating to Angel Flight, one in 2011 in Victoria and one in 2014 in Mount Gambier. People who jumped onto one of these flights and ended up in an air accident, a fatal air accident, and that is truly, truly upsetting. Now, CASA has looked at this, and in fact the ATSB is still looking at the second accident right now. Hopefully we'll see some reports on that shortly. But CASA then came along and introduced some new regulations. Some new regulations about minimum hours, about some maintenance-related stuff to do with aircraft. Initially, when they introduced it, they said helicopters can't be involved in these community service flights. We ask why. What was the safety basis for that decision? And very quickly, the instrument was amended, put back to the Parliament, allowing helicopters to fly. And that was within the space of a day or 2 of advocacy. But if you go back and you look at these new regulations, they're not focused on these accidents and safety. In fact, I've questioned CASA, I've talked to CASA, I've put questions on notice to the ATSB, which I might foreshadow when they get to estimates. They can expect me to send some torpedoes their way. Their answer was quite contemptuous in my view, but we'll have that discussion at estimates. none of the changes that have been made, had they been there back in 2011 or 2014, would have made one bit of difference in relation to these accidents. Not one thing on these new regulations, had they been implemented back when these terrible accidents took place, would have in any way changed the circumstances. So CASA's gone off and had a look at these two flights and decided they must do something. And what they've done is introduced a burden again on the industry that will see some of these flights no longer occur. And once again, it doesn't appear to be about safety. And so when we get to, hopefully in 15 days from tomorrow, 15 sitting days, I'll be asking the Senate, the Chamber, to disallow that particular instrument. I would encourage people, and I'll wander the halls of the building and make sure everyone understands how ridiculous it is. But this is what we face with CASA. CASA, as the industry has been declining, has been building up in its ranks. It's an empire that's grown quite significantly. So I get where you're coming from, Senator Rice, in terms of safety. It is really important, but the words in this bill do not put economics ahead of safety. Safety is still the primary concern of CASA. It just says they must have regard to making sure that we have a vibrant industry. Okay, that's just the usual balance you have when you've got conflicting requirements. But safety is paramount. Safety is paramount, and so there is no problem here. I've read the bill, and indeed, and I've sat in front of many pilots in the last Parliament in the RAC committee, and the industry is dying. You will get your ultimate aim, Senator Rice. There will be no planes flying in GA, and then you'll have ultimate safety in those circumstances. So, and it's not like the airlines will dictate to CASA that they're not commercial if certain regulation doesn't get pulled. That's not what's going to happen here. So I want, as I think most people here want, an efficient and sustainable Australian aviation industry sector where safety is paramount. It is important, but where CASA does give consideration to industry as it makes rules. That means it doesn't make rules like it is with the Angel Flight rules that are meaningless, add cost, and don't do one thing for safety. CASA has, as I said, has focused on safety to the point of running aircraft out of the skies, to the point where one day we'll have no GA aircraft. All of our pilots will then have to come from overseas. In fact, we've got a situation now where we've got a great environment for people to learn how to fly because of that sort of safe, open skies that we have with very little traffic compared to somewhere like the United States or Asia. Great opportunities. But it appears the only people that can afford to set up schools now are Qantas and Rex and some overseas entities. And we have to change that. And it's in that context that I commend this bill to the House, to the Senate.
Minister?
Yes. Thank you. So I wasn't sure if anyone else was looking to speak. So I thank senators for their contribution. Australia has an outstanding aviation safety record, and it's due to our strong regulatory framework. However, we need to continue to keep the balance right between risk and regulation. So the Civil Aviation Safety Amendment Bill of 2019 ensures that CASA continues to consider the economic and cost impact on industry and communities when developing aviation safety standards. This bill is designed to support a regulatory environment which continues to maintain confidence in the safety of aviation in Australia without unnecessarily restricting innovation and growth. It's important to note that this bill is not intended to and would not in any way impede CASA's ability to make operational decisions relating to safety. CASA must be allowed to ensure aviation in Australia is safe and reliable. In practical terms, the bill relates to CASA's work in developing and promulgating standards, taking into account the differing risks posed by those sectors and not to individual decisions or directions. The bill would not, for instance, have altered CASA's ability to make its recent decision to stop flights of Boeing 737 MAX aircraft on safety grounds. Safety of air navigation will still remain the most important consideration of CASA when it develops legislative safety standards. But CASA will also continue to take into consideration the cost, something I know is a key priority for our general aviation sector. I'd like to thank those in the opposition and a number on the crossbench for their support for this bill. I'm pleased that this new bill will support local aviation businesses and communities while ensuring CASA can still do its vital work of keeping us safe in our skies. I'd like to thank all senators for their contribution and I commend the bill to the Senate.
Thank you, Minister. First of all, we'll deal with the second reading amendment moved by Senator Rice. All those in favour say aye. All those against say no. The noes have it. Ring the bells.